All right, Dr. Corey Green, Dr. John Paul McTague, welcome to the first episode of a podcast I'm calling A Band of Biometricians. Well, this first episode, I think we're going to talk about the SOMENS meeting coming up, promote that a little bit, and then get into some interesting topics on forest inventory. But first of all, could you just give the audience just a little description about yourselves, who you are and what you do? Corey, can you go first?
Sure. Well, first of all, Mickey, thanks for asking me to be here. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. So for those who don't know me, my name is Corey Green. I'm an assistant professor of forest biometrics at Virginia Tech, and I'm the director of the Forest Modeling Research Cooperative.
Yes, I'm John Paul McTague. I am currently retired. I recently had a consulting company called Southern Biometrics. Prior to that, worked for Rayonier, a TMO in Atlanta, international paper, and university professor at Northern Arizona University. I do have experience in South America, both with private companies and with 3 universities in South America. Next month is the very large mensuration meeting. It'll be in the state of Minas Gerais at Mensuflor, and I will be a speaker there. I believe this will be my last occasion to be giving a speech, but I will be what's known as Mensuflor Sech.
Yeah, that's exciting. You're not going to give a talk at the SOMENS meeting?
I am handling the Mike Stroud problem, and this involves a point sampling question, but it's going back to an old, you might say, a tale, some have claimed, about some tricks one could use in point sampling to diminish some measurement precision. Is there any truth to that? And that's what the problem I'll try to look at. And then it also throws in something to stump some of the younger students who haven't heard of critical height sampling, and it'll make them do a little research to get that problem right.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you both for coming on today. I wish our other partner in crime, Christian, would have joined us to promote the SOMENS meeting, but both of you have hosted SOMENS meetings in the past, and we are now all 3 co-organizers trying to help Christian out with this meeting, and I think it's going to be great. I'm happy that Rayonier has decided to host. Happy to see everybody in Florida. John Paul, would you give us just a quick history of the SOMENS meeting as you remember it?
Yes. I first participated in the SOMENS meeting in the mid-'80s. At that time, the group was known as ASUB, which stood for Association of Southern University Biometricians. And I believe it had been going on for roughly 10 years, always quite informal, typically just a day and a half of presentations. It didn't focus on large dinners or get-togethers and things like that. And it was primarily Southern University biometricians, so very little participation from industry. And typically the number of participants didn't exceed 25. But over time, it did grow. There was a desire to include more topics, perhaps something involving quantitative forest management with either harvest scheduling or even some remote sensing actions. And Chris Zashevsky was very active changing that to become SOMENS meeting. Years ago, 2012, I think when we hosted it, we did make one major change. We started to simplify our whole registration procedure and start to use the Western Forestry and Conservation Group. And that was the first year for our group. And it simplified the whole registration procedure. They were able to use year-end funds and help along on the next one. They kept the mailing list. You can't believe how difficult it was to maintain private mailing lists. And so it's really, now it's much easier to organize. And they do a wonderful job even negotiating with the hotels on rates and give us tips on things like that. So that has been a great help.
Yeah.
So that's my brief history.
Yeah. When I was working on my master's in kind of mid to late 2000s, I went to my first SOMENS meeting was hosted by Dean Coble in San Antonio. And I think there were about 15 people in the room, and I might have been one of two graduate students. So to see what it's become today, where we can have up to 80 people and half of them grad students, it's just been amazing to see that progression. So
Yeah, the first conference I ever went to was a SOMENS meeting in Raleigh. And so that was a good introduction to the world of professional conferences. It was a nice setting.
Yeah. And how did you feel about hosting your first time, Corey? When was that, the year?
Yeah, I hosted SOMENS here in Blacksburg in 2021. And so that was as everyone knows, kind of a tough time to host an in-person event, but we did it. And it was probably a relatively small crowd for SOMENS that year. Obviously, a lot of people had travel restrictions, and but we did it. We had a nice turnout, maybe 30 or so people here in Blacksburg, and we had great weather and a lot of good talks. And I think it went really well. I learned a lot about hosting conferences and feel very prepared to do it again now. There's a lot of details that you don't really think about that goes into them that, once you've done it, you know what the right questions to ask and the right things to worry about and the things not to worry about.
Right.
And so it's a lot less stressful the second go around.
Yeah. I feel like it's one of those things, if you build it, they will come. But I know whenever you're hosting, you got to be stressing about, because I know classically biometricians are going to register at the last minute, submit abstracts at the last minute.
Yeah. Yeah. And Western Forestry, John Paul, I'm glad you brought them up. They are helpful because they do a lot of events. And so they know kind of like the deadlines you need to give. And, you need to say you need it by this time because, you realistically will get things at the last minute. And so for planning purposes, they're very helpful for kind of keeping you having realistic expectations.
Yeah.
All of that. So.
Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to be a part of it, to help understand what goes into it. I'm hoping that we can host in Mobile one year. Although Mike Strube wants us to host it in Gulf Shores because that's maybe his second favorite place in the world. So we might have to do another beach meeting after season in the cold north. We have been doing joint meetings with NEMO. We did last year, we're doing this year, so maybe they will host again next year and have another joint meeting. It's been excellent to get the kind of collaboration between the two groups because we can see different things, people working on similar problems but in a different forest type, and so they have unique views of how to apply some of the methodologies that we're working on.
Yeah. NEMO is a small group, but I really do like the joint format. They even though they're a small group, they do a lot of great work. And I like how our tradition of sort of one year do it in the South, kind of the next year do it farther north, because there's some people who just can't travel far for whatever reason.
Yeah,
and so it's nice to have it in different locale. And last year in Stowe, it was almost felt like a work vacation almost.
Right.
And, a little hard to get to, but not too bad. If you have to get on a plane and make a connection.
That's right. It's a day of travel, no matter, unless you're, close to home, but it's usually a day of travel. We're going to drive to Jacksonville because it is just as quick as it is to fly from Mobile. So it's a day of travel.
Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. And again, hope we have a good student turnout to see all of the new and improved methodologies coming out. Do you have a good showing of your students at the meeting?
Yeah, we should have from Virginia Tech. We should have probably, let's see, maybe 4 or 5 students coming, and then 4 or 5 others, faculty members, come from Virginia Tech. So we hopefully we'll have a good showing. I'm kind of hoping for like somewhere between 8 to 10 people from Virginia Tech to come. So that would hopefully will be a nice turnout, and I'm sure Georgia will come with plenty.
Yeah.
So
they'll probably have 2 vans.
Yeah, we're probably gonna fly. We might drive, but it's kind of on that, borderline. Like, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not as far as you think from Blacksburg to Jacksonville. It's not close, but it's not quite as far as you think.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, from Mobile, we feel like it's close, but it's still like a 7-hour drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's 7 hours. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's only like 9 hours of driving from Blacksburg.
Yeah.
Which
Right.
is kind of like, you wouldn't think that, but it actually is only about 9 hours of driving.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's exciting. First of all, I want to thank both of you guys for including me in the co-organizing committee. Again, it's been really great for me to learn what goes behind the organization of a meeting. Again, I appreciate Christian also taking up the mantle and hosting this year. It's good to see industry involved, and I would like to see consulting involved as well. We benefit greatly from all of the work that the universities do. And while we're all members of the various co-ops, it's great for us, I think, to take a part in that and to help support the next generation of biometricians coming out. We do like to hire them as soon as they graduate, so we should help support them while they're there.
Yeah. Well, I know the industry support is important.
The consultants play an immense role because for university biometricians, you are really our applied technology and getting the new techniques implemented out in the field and used and accepted. Oftentimes in communicating with landowners in a type of vocabulary that they feel comfortable with. Sometimes they feel professors can be a little brusque with them, and they don't really appreciate that. But the consultants have a very important role.
Yeah, it's important for us to be able to take the work that the universities are doing, interpret that, and help the landowner understand why that's important for them, and to be able to put it in a way that they're going to be able to understand it. Because if you start dropping, well, this improves RMSE by X number, they're going to go, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, hey, we can get you a better inventory at reduced costs. All right, that's what I'm talking about. Well, cool. Well, speaking of inventory, we discussed a topic that we wanted to cover, and I think, John Paul, you mentioned small area estimation. I think that is a huge forest inventory topic that everybody's wondering about now, just because the cost of inventory is going up. We're having improvements in our technologies, our the sensors that we're putting on machines and things like that. So Corey, you might be the expert on small area estimation. Could you just give us an overview of what that means?
Sure. So I appreciate you thinking I'm an expert, Mickey. I don't know if I would classify myself as that. I was saying earlier, I've successfully applied it to what I think are relevant applications. So maybe I'll call myself that. But essentially, small area estimation, and probably the context we'll speak about today, leverages kind of our traditional, quote, ground-based methods in conjunction with some source of auxiliary, or some people call it ancillary data, which often is derived from some sort of remote sensing product like LiDAR or Landsat or something along those lines. And essentially what the statistical estimators do is they form what's called a composite estimate. So it essentially, kind of think about it like a seesaw, is that it kind of gives more weight to either the remote sensing, the auxiliary data, or the ground data, depending on how reliable it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a really poor estimate from your ground data for whatever reason, the estimator might lean heavier to the kind of the synthetic estimate from the ancillary information. If you have a really good, if you did a great job on the ground, it's gonna weight heavier towards that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably what the estimator does, and the goal is that you have more precision with your estimates. You have more certainty with your estimates, and so from a management perspective, you hopefully can make better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the goal of small area estimation.
Yeah, John Paul, would you be able to comment on how small area estimation would be useful for industry?
Sure. In conversations with industry biometricians, both here in the United States and certainly in Brazil, there is immense pressure to reduce the intensity of sampling, of forest sampling, the ground estimates that Corey just mentioned. And I see this in numerous cases. So why is the small area estimation so useful? That auxiliary information that Corey mentioned, that is generally very highly correlated with our variable of interest: volume, green weight, biomass. And the auxiliary information is cheap in general terms. It's inexpensive to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
So it's highly correlated with our variable of interest, and it's inexpensive to acquire. Corey, in 2022, published a wonderful small area estimation example in the Journal of Forestry. And one of the auxiliary variables was age. Well, for a plantation in the US South, we always know the age. That's given. And it can be a very powerful variable. So if we include that in addition to our ground-based estimate, putting the boots on the ground, we can really increase our precision. And that's so important because most likely there will be real pressure upon the organization to decrease the intensity of ground sampling. So Corey has done wonderful work, I think, with a number of type of small area estimators. Generally, he's worked at what we call the area level. Typically, I think the industry has more of an interest at the unit level, and Corey can probably go into that to try to show the distinction, but unit level has its problems too in acquisition of some of that information. So it's very timely. I sense in spanning both continents, there is that real desire to increase our precision at a given intensity, or if we decrease the sampling intensity for the ground, we at least want to hold the precision where it is.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, inventory is just across the board getting more expensive. We are having less resources, it seems, to put into inventory, and we still want to get the same level of precision in our inventory by putting in less plots. And so that's just, a generalized statement, but I think it's true everywhere. So as you said, John Paul, this is very timely to start understanding how we can use that auxiliary information to get better inventories. Corey, would you mind explaining the difference between the area and the unit level?
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty high level. So area level essentially correlates area level estimates to area level auxiliary data. So like stand to stand, essentially. Unit level relies on pairing directly with a sample unit. So like with your ground sample unit, right? So you need to, like, let's say you have a fixed area plot on the ground. That's your that's your ground data, a 10th acre plot, just sort of a, as an example. You would build your you would build your relationship with your ancillary data at the plot level. So like the LiDAR, you would pair directly to that plot.
Mm-hmm.
And as John Paul said, that does present challenges. That spatial pairing can be a challenge, even with modern GPS technology. That pairing can be less than ideal. Accuracy under canopy is always a challenge, even with very high quality GPS units. And so you get error there. And I think that's actually kind of probably an active area of research, is how impactful that error is. And also, kind of where I started with small area estimation was from the Forest Inventory and Analysis Program. From their perspective, a challenge when they're producing county level, survey unit level, or state level estimates is that the FIA plot locations are proprietary. And so it's for good reasons, I think. And so that spatial pairing, unless you have exact coordinates, can be very challenging. Because
unless you're an agent. I've always liked that Forest Service designation. You can get the coordinates, the precise coordinates, FIA plots, if you're an agent.
Yeah, but those precise locations are subject to the same errors that anybody would be dealing with even high quality GPS units. So that's probably the challenge with unit level approaches. It does offer kind of the potential for better improvements in precision. And so, which is better, I think, is still also sort of an active question. And it probably does depend on the questions you're answering.
Yeah.
So
I was reading a paper, I think maybe John Colston was the lead author on this paper. It's the review and the synthesis of small area estimation that you're a part of, Corey. And I was looking through all of the papers that had been cited, and it seems like the majority of the work that's gone into small area estimation has been based on NFIs. So I assume that is because, the amount of data that's available, how easy it is to get to it. It's generally free. But as you said, it comes with those the issues that you don't get to match the plots exactly to your auxiliary information, assuming that we're talking about a remotely sensed auxiliary information.
Yeah.
So,
just to comment on that, Mickey, if you don't, sorry to interrupt, is I think the National Forest Inventory Program is kind of a perfect place to start for small area estimation research and application. It hasn't always been like this, but it's now a nationally consistent design, which is pretty remarkable that it got pulled off. And it's the original design, the design-based sample is it's kind of spatial scales that it's designed for are often not the spatial scales that, and I should say temporal scales as well, are not necessarily meeting the increased demands on the design. And so it was designed to produce estimates with a certain level of precision at a spatial and temporal scale that maybe no longer meets the needs of the end user all the time. And so there's kind of a temptation to use NFI programs for at scales they were not designed for.
Right.
And so
most certainly.
Yeah. And so small area estimation offers a very appealing solution to that problem. And so and I think that's probably where a lot of that work started. And they were successful in getting language in the Farm Bill to kind of pursue that work as well, which was a huge was huge for small area estimation research. So
Corey, you're exactly right. If one looks at the wonderful sampling textbook by Wayne Fuller, professor at Iowa State, really a leader in small area estimation in some ways. That's what he points out to. Yes, that's been the real impetus for small area estimation, because every time they had a national inventory system, could be in agriculture or in rangeland, people wanted the information applied at a smaller scale, and were looking to how could they boost the precision with the auxiliary information. I think what I sense in industry, though, getting back to that unit distinction versus area level, is programs like Fusion that the Forest Service created to help us with remote sensing interpretation. If somehow a program like that could be extended, whereby industry could use that and say, I've got the LiDAR information, I have this stereo nape imagery, I would love to use that imagery for our timberlands plus a Fusion program, combine that, and then we could get into small area estimation for ourselves. And that's where I think the universities have a tremendous potential role. They could sort of take that, get some startup money from industry, and build a package that they then could distribute to their members and say, hey, you can use this, we'll help you get there.
Yeah, that's a good idea, John Paul. I mean, the barrier to entry is a little high to starting to implement small area estimation. And it's not easy at first, and it involves especially from a industry standpoint, I would think, the challenge would be developing processes to do this at scale repeatedly.
Yes.
Where from a research perspective, it's pretty, quote, easy to spin up an example, on a given piece of ground with a kind of one-time design with a one-time collection of LiDAR. But having to do this every year across expansive land bases is a big challenge.
Sure.
And
I don't think any industry group by themselves could tackle it. It would have to be a cooperative effort. But that's just an idea. I sense there is interest in it. Industry would like to adopt it, but that barrier to entry is quite a hurdle that you just mentioned, Corey. And but together and with some university direction, I think it would draw a great interest.
Yeah.
If you're a large, industry company and you have been collecting LiDAR and field plots for a decade or more, do you have a sufficient data set to start working on your own estimators?
Without questions, after all, when you use this auxiliary information, the secret to it is it has to be highly correlated with the ground information. It doesn't have to match it. It just has to be correlated to it. So it could be a few years old, and if one did the aerial remote sensing interpretation, found out that, it's underestimating a little. It doesn't matter if it's highly correlated with the principal variable, the volume, green weight, or biomass on the ground. It doesn't matter. It's just correlated, and it corrects itself. So yes, historical information from remote sensing is still useful.
Yeah, John Paul, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I have a small area estimation textbook by Rao, which goes through extensive details of all types of estimators. But, one of the biggest take-home messages in that textbook is just what John Paul said, is the key to small area estimation is having good auxiliary data.
Yeah.
And, you can kind of take that thought experiment to the extreme and think like, if you had perfectly correlated auxiliary data, of course it's going to work well. It's perfectly correlated with the thing you're interested in. And so, but if you have poorly correlated auxiliary data, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
And so that's the key. And, in terms of the estimators themselves, the statistical estimators, they're in place. We have the statistical community has done a lot of great work to derive very useful estimators. And it's on us, I think, to basically develop programs to collect good auxiliary data and be thoughtful about how we design our ground-based samples as well. And I think that's still, from a research perspective, a very open area of how to get that right.
Yeah.
Sure. So Corey, if you were to say, hey, we're going to increase the correlation, let's say at a unit level, between this remotely sensed product and your ground plots. But your advice to the folks using this or implementing a design on the ground is you might say, sorry, you can't use a point sample. We're going to need a fixed area plot of some dimension or some configuration.
Yeah.
Because most likely a point sample plot, while it could be correlated with a remote sense product, the correlation will probably slip a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of really interesting questions that are still, I think, available for making small area estimation truly operational. So.
Yeah, but I sense the interest is there, the desire to get there. Folks want to use it. Folks are interested, but collectively and with some university guidance, I think they can get there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your auxiliary information has to be very correlated with your variable of interest, with biomass and whatever, LiDAR metrics or canopy coverage. That always seems to be very highly correlated. But what about when we want to get things like, weight of products, specific products? We're talking about quality. We're talking about value here. How good is the techniques now to be able to get something like that?
No, I would go back, Mickey, and look at some of the pioneering work that was done by Tom Matney at Mississippi State, where he was looking at double sampling and but wanted information by products or even down to DBH classes, and then how to get that information consistent with the double sample estimator. So double sampling has auxiliary information. Okay, in this case, it was just basal area plots. It wasn't remote sensing, but basal area where we just sweep around with a prism and just get a count of entries. And then it had the precisely measured plots. But the same way, he was able to disaggregate the final estimate down to resolution that was consistent with the ground level estimate. So it can be done, this disaggregation.
Yeah. So whenever I hear of remotely sensed inventory, and we're talking about just small area estimation now, not like a completely remotely sensed inventory, but whenever I hear about it, I always get concerned because at the end of the day, it's up to me, the consultant, to put a value on I'm not an appraiser, but I provide the data to put a value on something. And if they come back and go, well, the biomass is this much, they can't put a value on that, right? Well, unless we're talking about carbon, but we're not. We're talking about actual products.
Yeah.
And with the way that the markets have changed, we just saw 2 pulp mills close in Georgia. Like, things are changing rapidly, and the estimating the value is being more and more important to be more and more precise. So I'm just curious how we might, adapt to the fact that inventory is getting more expensive, our products are changing, we're getting tighter margins, and then now we're talking about a small area estimation, disaggregation or whatever to get back to that. How do you feel about, the way that we're going now? How close are we to something that might actually be useful for people like me? Stumped.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mickey.
Well, we don't have a off-the-shelf program that you could
Yeah.
use for that.
Right.
Um, if you look at an off-the-shelf program for ground sampling like T-Cruise,
Mm,
it certainly can do that disaggregation
mm,
from a double point sample system, which is auxiliary information
right.
and also your variable of interest volume. It can disaggregate that into products and into diameter classes. So the construction is there. And Corey mentioned this too. Hey, a lot of the small area estimation is known. Now what we have to do is take that and develop it for our particular forest-based sector.
Yeah.
But it's going to need some coordination. And I think there could be a real interest, though, getting back to what I mentioned before.
Yeah.
There is that desire that.
Yeah. Mickey, I think a lot of our remotely sensed data that we kind of traditionally think about is all an aerial platform, whether it's a drone or a airplane or a satellite. But they all have some pretty inherent limitations. Anything from above has limitations,
Mhm.
regardless of how high of resolution it is. There's certain things that it's just better at,
Mhm.
and so it's probably to really get towards small area estimation for things like products, it's probably going to take new auxiliary data,
Mhm.
and that might not be from above because
Right.
you can only do so much from above,
Right.
at least for now. And so, there's a lot of very research level work, collecting auxiliary data below the canopy, for example.
Mhm.
It's still very research level in many ways, but that could be a solution,
Yeah.
to kind of what you're going for. And it maybe eventually it's going to get to where, we don't need small area estimation techniques, that, we can collect data below the canopies so quickly that even if it's still a sample, that we don't really,
Yeah.
our solution to better precision is just collect more plots.
Terrestrial LiDAR, something like that.
Yeah, terrestrial LiDAR, we get really good at it, and we can just collect a lot of plots, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
When I was in Norway, they were, and this has been 5 years since I was there. And so we're talking about at least 15 years ago that they were starting this. They were just putting the sensors on the cutter so that whenever the cutter drove through and was doing the thinning, you had a, wall to wall LiDAR inventory after the cutter was through. And it was really interesting to see. I don't know where they are on that work now, but it was interesting to see even 15 years ago that was being started. Now we're not doing it in the Southeast U.S., but it would seem to me like as soon as the guy gets done cutting the first row, you should be flying a drone or walking with your backpack or going in at that point, because that's the most open that stand is ever going to be.
yeah.
If you come back 2 years later, you have Rubus taller than me. It's not hard, but still.
Yeah. That's one thing that we might not like it, but humans are really good at navigating complicated forested environments.
Right.
Our brains are really good at it.
Yeah.
Programming some sort of robotic technology to handle situations like that is a challenge.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't want to get too far into the
yeah.
Remotely sense inventory, because that's kind of not the topic of today. But
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the papers that I read of yours, Corey, it talked about kind of machine assisted inventory, and I don't think you went in too far into that. But it seems like, again, if you go back to your I'll use Rainier because John Paul came from Rainier. If you're a Rainier and you have so much data, it seems like that's the point where you could really apply some machine learning techniques to be able to estimate an inventory in a stand where you don't have plots. Because guess what? If we are planting 605 trees per acre consistently, and we know the site from, the height information that we can get from LiDAR or whatever, we should be able to pretty easily get back to an inventory from our database, right? What do you think about that, John Paul?
I'm in agreement. If you pick up any aerial photo and look at it, first thing you're going to see in a plantation are holes, non-planted areas for some reason, or just the whole road system and things like that. So these typically have to involve area deductions then from your database. And something like a remote sense image is going to be hard for somebody to interpret, looking at 1 million hectares. Yeah, we could use some type of machine learning to go through that and at least pick out our holes, that exceed 500 square meters. That would be wonderful. So we have a much better area estimate of our planted forest.
We're doing that, and I'm happy to share this information with everyone. We're not stuck behind an NDA or something where we can't talk about it. We are using freely available LiDAR information, and we're doing a kind of pixel-based estimation. So we're taking the LiDAR and we're converting it into some gridded, raster-based estimate of height, so that we can actually then come back and say, where are the low spots in the stand? Go look at that. That might be a place you got to type out. And
sure, I mean, even some simple stratification. If you use that just to stratify your forest, my goodness, you've already got a gain right there in your precision when it comes time for sampling, because you use the stratified sampling estimator there.
Yeah. So
it can be tremendously powerful. It's just not a complete replacement for boots on the ground. And that has been difficult for many groups, especially the venture capitalists that threw all this money into remote sensing interpretation, to understand that boots on the ground are still needed.
Yeah. Which you said they threw all this money into it, and I know for the forestry world, we feel like they're throwing a lot of money at us. But when they have $300 million to invest and they give us $3 million, it's not a lot of money for them. So it's a small risk that they're taking, but for us, it's huge, right? Because that's a lot of money going into I guess an industry with very small profit margins. I'm talking about cruising in general.
I don't really know, to be honest with you. But something that I've kind of thought a lot about, and John Paul, I'd like to get your perspective on this, is sort of, in industry, how is inventory sampling, is it viewed as a cost, kind of just a necessary cost? And how is the view from industry of sampling?
I believe it is viewed as a cost.
Yeah.
And therefore, in the current environment right now, where our housing starts are so low and the price of saw timber is low, revenues are low, there is a great scrutiny going on in 2025 on inventory costs. And some of the rumors that I hear about on what could be cut are a little frightening. So I don't know if they'll go through it. Yes, it is viewed as a cost. It is not viewed as some type of strategic investment in their portfolio management.
Yeah, I've always been interested in that, because it seems like it's an opportunity to rethink how rethink the attitude towards sampling, because an estimate with high levels of uncertainty is going to imply that you're going to have high levels of uncertainty on management decisions.
Sure.
And so, if you think about like a per acre let's say cost for samples, if in the scheme of things, it's pretty low.
It is.
And so like, but you can, if you can make a much more confident decision, if you have a much better precision on the value of the stand, I mean, it seems like it could be sort of reframed to be more of an investment in a stand.
I believe so. Mickey, I'd like your perspective on this. In my perspective, well, I'll just give a little introduction to this. But we've been looking for auxiliary information. But isn't the previous cruise, I mean, we've already expended that historical information, isn't that valuable?
Yes.
Isn't that, that's essentially a free information, you might say. We had that. Okay, there's no expense attached to that. But when we, and this is my experience, when we conduct a new cruise for that stand, say at a 5 or 6 year interval, that previous information that we had is discarded.
Mm-hmm.
That historical information is not used. And you would be hard pressed to find any CFI system among the forest products industry in the United States. So they've essentially abandoned that. But what's your experience, Mickey, when you see a lot of different firms, a lot of different databases approach, when they conduct a new cruise and refresh that information, isn't the old cruise information just tossed, thrown away?
Yeah. So my company, Larson & McGowan, we have a subsidiary called Silvix Solutions. Silvix maintains a platform that is beyond anything that I can describe. But at its base, it is a forestry, is a GIS and forestry database. It's made to hold inventory, to be able to visualize it, to be able to, it's got a full GIS like art. You can do shades and merge them and whatever. One of the things that I've been working on is being able to store the historic information, because like you said, John Paul, when new inventory comes in, the old inventory is just wiped out. Now, one of the unique things about our database that I've seen, and I say unique because I know that others are working in like art in like a shapefile or something where they carry a one-liner of inventory. We have an SQL-based system, so we're able to have diameter distributions stored in the data. Well, one of the reasons that they wipe information out is because classically data storage has been expensive and it's been hard to come by. Whereas, 15 years ago, we had 2 megabytes of memory. Now we're having terabytes of memory in computers. So I think we're seeing that evolve. And that's one point we're going to be able to start using that information. So I agree with you. It's highly valuable. We are maintaining our own database right now of historical data. We spent quite a bit of time and money to create this just for the time period when we can actually upload that into our system and be able to use it. So yeah, 100%. Now, one of the things that I deal with, and it becomes more complicated. I think it's easier for a company like Rainier, who owns all the data that's all associated with one entity. I work with 200 clients, and their data is their data. And so to be able to say, oh, I'm going to use this data for this client to infer data on the other client, well, that's not ethical, right? And so I can't do it. And while we can, work on methods and methodologies, it becomes a lot more complicated for me to be able to put something together to myself. And that's why I rely a lot on the universities to come up with this kind of methodology so that I can do it for everybody.
But here's room for, a type of system. It could be a new industrial type of continuous forest inventory where we don't discard historical information. Yeah. It can be used as an auxiliary variable. Mm-hmm. So really, we're just kind of scratching the surface. We've talked about remote sensing, that's a natural. But age that you used very effectively, Corey, and other historical information can be used. It can really reduce our costs.
John Paul, along those lines, about old inventory information, from kind of the perspective of the estimators that have, like the Fay Harriet estimator that you've talked about so far today. A challenge with using some old historical information is that the assumption has to be made that those information don't have sampling error, but they do. You can't say this is the truth. But the
as an
statisticians,
independent variable, you're saying it's measured without error, typically,
yeah,
or X variables. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
the statisticians have figured this out, and
Okay.
there's different estimators that can take into account that sampling error.
Okay.
And so, it's basically, it's just from an example of a Fay Harriet, there's a variant of it that accounts for the fact that the auxiliary data has sampling error.
Sure.
And so it's just it's like a more conservative Fay Harriet.
Okay.
So
So
the
you get a
statisticians
more precise interval estimate. Typically, what I would think, though, is some of the auxiliary information, if it did have problems indeed with it, it's just going to have a lower correlation with your variable of interest. It becomes less effective.
Yeah. And so, and there is other kind of small area adjacent techniques that have been explored, like the Kalman filter. There's Burkhardt and Gregoire and who else? Forgot the other person who was on the article back a long time ago, provided a nice example of how, techniques such as that can be used for just this question. So the methodology's there. It's really just a matter of processes in place, like you were speaking, Mickey, to have the data in place to be able to apply these estimators that already exist. So,
Mickey, we have but a few minutes left. One thing I wanted to say, I'll try to be brief, is we are sensing in the United States with these recent mill closures, certainly in the Southeast with the Georgetown mill, now the Savannah mill, big impacts in our forest products industry. We're seeing a decrease in capacity, certainly for output. But there is an astounding investment that is going on now in southwestern Brazil. The Chilean company, Arauco, has just announced that they're going to build the biggest pulp mill in the world. This will be close to 10,000 tons per day. And given the area, I'm sure it will be short fiber bleached pulp. Now, to give you an idea, the largest mills in the United States are typically 2,000 tons a day. So this will be close to 10,000 tons a day. And the investment in this thing is going to be close to $9 billion. So across the world, yes, there is still interest in a very modern, fast-growing plantations, modern forestry, and a vibrant forest products industry. Unfortunately, here we're seeing where some of the older mills are being retired. So just leave it at that. It's not all doom and gloom.
In terms of, is there going to be a pulp industry? It's not doom and gloom. Yeah, we expect there to be one in Brazil, but what's happening here in the Southeast U.S., which is where I'm primarily located, which is why I'm concerned about that, and while these older mills are going offline, we're not seeing a whole lot of new ones come online.
Well, no, not there.
Well,
No.
Weyerhaeuser is building one in Arkansas, I believe, right? But other than that, I don't know of any new pulp mills coming up. Of course, I'm not the expert on mill openings, but we are going to see, I think, quite a big change in how we are planning plantation forests in the Southeast, and probably in the rest of the U.S. as well.
Well, the United States still retains a strong comparative advantage, though, in the forest products industry, especially for the long fiber, conifer products. So that get that strength into building products and get that strength into the boxes and the strong craft papers.
Yeah.
So we have that, and what it's going to take is some more initiative by some of the industry to reinvest.
Mm.
That's certainly we have to see.
Yeah, for sure. Well, something's got to change. And we already saw this when I was in Norway. We had already seen that. They had something like 12 paper mills in the country. And by the time I got there in 2016, they only had 2. They had invested heavily in specialized paper for like magazines, and then of course people stopped reading magazines. So, but we're not necessarily seeing out in the rest of the world though the paper products going away. People still need paper products. They're being used. They're just coming from elsewhere, which is really affecting the way that we're going to have to manage our forests. So, and to tie it back in might make it a bit more complicated to estimate the future forests when we are managing them differently than we are today. So we've built up this database, forest inventory and auxiliary information, and then all of a sudden our metrics are changing because we're planting fewer trees. We might have to think about how we're going to incorporate that.
Agreed. We have to anticipate changes. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think we'll wrap it up here. I thought it was a great conversation. I thank you both for coming today and to basically to listen to me ramble about things that I don't know about. But I appreciate both of you.
We all do that. Welcome to the field of scholars here, the club, you might say.
Yeah, well, we are a band of biometricians, and I really appreciate both of you and your expertise. And then I hope to, of course, see you soon. If not before, I will see you in Fernandina Beach in the end of October, and hopefully we have a lot of the listeners today will join us as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. Great to be here.
It's been a pleasure.